My name is Abigail, 67 years young, and I was making spaghetti and meatballs for my grandchildren when my world shattered. I still see Tom's pale face as he grabbed his sister's hand, eyes wide with fear. "Grandma, we're leaving! Now!" he shouted, pulling Sophie toward the door. I stood frozen, sauce-covered spoon in hand, wondering what horrors my precious grandchildren had discovered in my basement. What had my own children hidden beneath my home? If you're watching this from your own home with family secrets, hit that like button and subscribe. Let me know in the comments if you've ever discovered something shocking about someone you thought you knew completely. I've been a widow for 5 years now. William, my husband of 42 years, passed away from a sudden heart attack while working in his beloved garden. Since then, I've lived alone in our house, a 2-story colonial we purchased when we were barely in our 20s. The house has aged, along with us developing creaks in the floorboards that match the creaks in my joints. My relationship with my grown children has always been what I considered normal. Not perfect, but loving. Margaret, my eldest at 39, always was the ambitious one. Even as a child, she had her sights set on bigger things than our small suburban neighborhood could offer. Now she's a marketing executive for a national company, always flying somewhere important, her phone perpetually attached to her ear. She's often too busy to visit, but she makes sure her children Tom and Sophie spend time with me. Tom is 12 now, a serious boy with his mother's determination and his grandfather's kind eyes. Sophie, just 8, is a bundle of energy and curiosity. Then there's Brian, my son, 35, and the child I've always felt closer to. Where Margaret soared away from home at the first opportunity, Brian stayed nearby. He works in IT, something with computers that I never fully understood despite his patient explanations. Brian used to visit several times a week, helping with home repairs and joining me for Sunday dinners. But over the past year, something changed. His visits became less frequent, his manner more distant. When he did come by, he seemed distracted, checking his phone constantly, avoiding my eyes. Our basement has always been just that, a basement, a bit musty with concrete floors and walls that William painted white years ago. We used it mainly for storage, old holiday decorations, winter clothes and summer clothes in winter. Nothing special, nothing secret. Or so I thought. There was a minor dispute with our neighbors, the Millers, about 10 years ago. Something about the property line and a fence they wanted to build. William handled it, and eventually we all became friends again. That's how neighbors should be, I've always believed. Work out your problems, then share a coffee cake, and move on. Raising my children wasn't always easy, especially after William's job at the bank became uncertain during the recession. We tightened our belts. I took on part-time work at the local library, and somehow we managed. Margaret and Brian never went without the essentials, though I know they were aware of our struggles. I made sure they had opportunities, chances I never had growing up. Margaret's college education was expensive, but worth every penny when I saw her walk across that stage in her cap and gown. Brian chose a technical school instead, learning his way around computers when they were just becoming essential in everyday life. About 3 months ago, Brian suggested I think about selling the house. "It's too big for you, Mom," he said during one of his increasingly rare visits. "The maintenance, the stairs, it's not safe for someone living alone." I dismissed the idea immediately. This house held my life within its walls. Every scratch on the kitchen doorframe marked Margaret and Brian's growth. Every dent in the hardwood had a story. I wasn't ready to leave. A week later, Margaret called with her own suggestion. "Mom, why don't we renovate the basement, turn it into a proper storage area, maybe even a little apartment you could rent out for extra income?" The timing seemed suspicious, both my children suddenly concerned about my house. When I mentioned this, Margaret laughed it off. "We just want what's best for you," she said. The weekend Tom and Sophie came to stay was supposed to be ordinary. Margaret had a business conference in Chicago, and the children would spend Friday night through Sunday with me. I planned their favorite meals, rented movies I thought they'd enjoy, and looked forward to the sound of young voices filling my quiet house. Little did I know that this weekend would uncover secrets that had been literally beneath my feet for decades. The first unusual thing I noticed wasn't dramatic, just a collection of small oddities that niggled at the back of my mind. One night, about 6 months ago, I woke to a strange humming sound. It seemed to be coming from downstairs, a mechanical whir that I couldn't identify. When I went to investigate, the sound stopped. I convinced myself it was the refrigerator or the furnace, though it hadn't sounded like either. Then there were the furniture movements. Small things, at first a chair slightly askew the coffee table, not quite where I had left it. I blamed my aging memory until I came home one day to find my reading lamp on the opposite side of the sofa. I never would have moved it there. The light would hit all wrong for my needlework. The electricity bill came next, showing usage nearly double my normal amount. When I called the power company, they suggested I might have left something running or had an appliance malfunctioning. I checked everything I could think of, but found nothing amiss. When I mentioned the bill to Brian during one of his visits, he seemed unusually interested, asking to see it, and then quickly changing the subject. "Mom, you really shouldn't go into the basement much anymore," Brian said out of nowhere one evening as I mentioned needing to bring up my winter sweaters. "Those stairs are steep, and with your arthritis, it's an accident waiting to happen." His concern seemed genuine, but something in his tone made me uneasy. "I've been going up and down those stairs for 40 years, Brian," I replied, trying to keep my voice light. "I think I can manage." "I just worry," he said, not meeting my eyes. "How about I get those sweaters for you? Actually, I could come by this weekend and help organize everything down there." Margaret echoed these sentiments when we spoke on the phone the next day. "Mom, you should hire someone to clean out that basement. It's full of Dad's old junk, and probably mouse droppings, and who knows what else." "Your father's things are not junk," I said, perhaps more sharply than intended. "And I keep a clean house, Margaret. There are no mice." "I'm just saying it's not safe for you to be hauling things up and down those stairs. Let me arrange for a cleaning service." It was the similarity of their concerns that first made me suspicious. My children rarely agreed on anything, yet here they were both suddenly preoccupied with keeping me out of my own basement. One afternoon, I happened to overhear a phone conversation between Brian and Margaret. I hadn't meant to eavesdrop, but I was bringing in groceries through the side door when I heard Brian's voice in the backyard. He was speaking quietly, but intensely. "Mom cannot know about this, Margaret. Not yet." A pause as he listened. "We need more time. The setup isn't ready to move." Another pause. "Just leave everything where it is. Don't touch anything down there. I'll handle it." I stood, frozen grocery bags growing heavy in my arms, a cold feeling spreading through my chest. My children were hiding something from me, something in my own house. The hurt ran deep, a blade between my ribs. These were my children, whom I had raised to be honest, whom I trusted completely. What could be so terrible that they felt they needed to deceive me? That evening, I went to the basement door, determined to discover whatever secret lay below. To my surprise, the door wouldn't open. The knob turned, but the door seemed stuck. When I finally managed to pull it open with a hard tug, I found a new deadbolt lock installed above the handle. A lock I had no key for in my own home. I sat on the top stair, anger and hurt warring within me. William and I had never kept secrets from each other or from our children. We had built this family on trust and openness. Or so I had believed. Now I wondered what else I might be wrong about. William had always tended to the basement. He'd called it his domain jokingly, but I had respected his space. He spent hours down there puttering with his tools or organizing his collection of vintage records. Had there been something else going on all those years? Something he never shared with me? I remembered how in the months before his death, William had seemed preoccupied, spending even more time in the basement than usual. I had attributed it to retirement boredom, a man trying to find purpose when his working days were over. Now I wondered if there had been more to it. The next day, I ran into Jean, my neighbor of 35 years, while checking my mail. Jean was in her 70s, a retired schoolteacher with sharp eyes that missed nothing in our neighborhood. "How are you holding up, Abigail?" she asked, leaning on her cane. "I saw Brian's car here yesterday. Nice that he visits." "Yes, it is," I said, not wanting to share my concerns. Jean peered at me over her glasses. "Lot of coming and going at your house these past months, especially when you're out at your book club or grocery shopping. Brian's car, sometimes others I don't recognize." My heart skipped a beat. "What do you mean?" "Oh, nothing to worry about, I'm sure," Jean said, but her eyes told a different story. "Just noticed people going in and out, always through the back door. Carrying things sometimes. But I'm sure it's all fine. Children looking after their mother, that's all." As Jean shuffled back to her house, her words echoed in my mind. People coming and going when I wasn't home. Through the back door, which led directly to the basement stairs. Carrying things. What things? And who were these people I didn't know entering my home without my knowledge? The next day, while cleaning William's old desk in the study, I found a folder I hadn't seen before. It contained documents related to our house, including the original blueprint. As I studied it, something caught my attention. According to the blueprint, our basement extended several feet further on the north side than I remembered. I frowned, comparing the dimensions on paper to my mental image of the space. Either my memory was failing, or the basement I knew was smaller than it should have been. Mixed in with the blueprints were receipts for construction materials from 25 years ago, around the time William had taken a week off work to reorganize the basement. Concrete lumber drywall, enough materials to build a small room. I had never questioned the project, busy as I was with teenagers and my part-time job at the library. William had always handled house maintenance, and I had trusted him completely. At the bottom of the folder was a small notebook bound in worn leather. William's journal. I had never read it while he was alive, respecting his privacy. But now, with questions multiplying in my mind, I felt justified in opening it. Most entries were mundane notes about work and family, but scattered throughout were cryptic references. Meeting Jay again tomorrow. Situation becoming untenable. Need more secure location. Basement modifications complete. A. Suspects nothing. Relief and guilt in equal measure. Debt nearly cleared. 2 more payments should do it. Then I can put this behind me. I sat back in William's old chair, the journal trembling in my hands. What debt? What situation had my husband been hiding? And why did he feel the need to modify our basement in secret? I decided to visit Frank Williams' oldest friend. They had worked together at the bank for decades, and if anyone knew William's secrets, it would be Frank. He seemed unsurprised to see me at his door, ushering me in with a sad smile. "I wondered when you'd come asking questions," he said as he poured us both coffee in his cluttered kitchen. "After Brian started the operation back up." My cup froze halfway to my lips. "What operation?" Frank's face fell. "You don't know. God, Abigail, I thought Brian had finally told you." "Told me what, Frank? Please, I need to understand what's happening in my home." Frank sighed heavily, rubbing his lined face. "William got into some trouble about 30 years ago. Bad investments, then borrowing to cover his losses. Got mixed up with some people you don't want to owe money to. He was desperate to keep you and the kids in the dark to protect you." 30 years ago? I repeated. When he was working so many late hours. When he said the bank was going through an audit. Frank nodded. "He found a way to pay it back. Not entirely legal, but he didn't have a choice by then. Used the basement as let's call it a business center. I helped him build a wall to create a hidden room for the equipment. Equipment for what, Frank? He looked away. Better you ask Brian that part. But William got out clean, paid his debts. I thought it was over when he died. Then, about a year ago, one of the old associates contacted Brian. Said there was still money owed. Interest, they claimed. My mind reeled. William, my straight arrow husband, who cautioned the children about even the smallest white lies, had been involved in something illegal. Had built a secret room in our home, and now Brian was continuing whatever it was. When I returned home, I installed a small security camera in the living room, angled toward the back door. A gift from Margaret last Christmas that I had never used, thinking it too complicated. Now I set it up carefully, following the instructions with determined focus. 2 days later, reviewing the footage while Margaret thought I was at my book club, I saw Brian enter through the back door. He carried a black duffel bag and moved quickly to the basement door, unlocking it with a key from his pocket. An hour later, he emerged empty-handed, looking furtively around before leaving. That evening, I noticed muddy footprints leading from the basement door to the back entrance. A distinct boot pattern that didn't belong to either of my children. Someone else had been in my house while I was gone. Later that night, as I lay in bed trying to make sense of everything I'd learned, I heard it again. The humming sound, mechanical and rhythmic, coming from the basement. It continued for hours, stopping just before dawn. Whatever was down there, it was running at night when they thought I would be asleep. The next morning, I called both Margaret and Brian, asking them to come over for dinner that weekend. We need to talk about the house, I said. All of us together. Margaret made excuses about work deadlines. Brian claimed a prior commitment. Both promised to visit soon, just not this weekend. Their avoidance only strengthened my resolve to discover the truth. I dug deeper into our old financial records, finding irregularities I had never noticed before. Large deposits into our joint account that William had explained as work bonuses or investment returns. Withdrawals with vague explanations. A pattern of financial smoke and mirrors that had completely escaped my attention at the time. Alongside these discoveries came dreams of William, vivid and disturbing. In one recurring dream, he stood at the basement door trying to tell me something important, but no sound would come from his moving lips. I would wake, gasping, the ghost of his presence still lingering in the dark room. In another strange coincidence, I found an old electric bill from 25 years ago while sorting through papers. The usage pattern matched what I was seeing now, spikes of power consumption that couldn't be explained by normal household activities. Whatever had been happening then was happening again now. The weekend Tom and Sophie came to stay began normally enough. I picked them up from school on Friday afternoon. Sophie chattering about her science project, Tom quieter, but seemingly happy to see me. We had pizza for dinner, their favorite, and watched a movie together in the living room. Before bed, I told them a story, as I always did when they stayed over. This time, I chose an old fairy tale about a house with secrets, watching their faces carefully as I spoke. Sophie remained engrossed in the story, but Tom seemed uncomfortable, shifting on the bed and avoiding my eyes. As I tucked them in, Sophie said innocently, "Uncle Brian says we're not supposed to go in your basement, Grandma." My heart stuttered, but I kept my expression neutral. "Oh, and why is that?" I asked lightly. "He says it's dangerous and dirty," she replied, snuggling into her pillow. "And that there are private things down there." Tom shot his sister a warning look. "Sophie, be quiet. You weren't supposed to say anything." "What private things, Tom?" I asked, keeping my voice gentle. "Nothing," he said quickly. "Uncle Brian just said we shouldn't bother you about the basement, that's all." I let the subject drop, kissing them both goodnight and leaving their door ajar as Sophie liked. But the seed of an idea had been planted. Children's curiosity was a powerful force, one I had counted on as a mother, and now as a grandmother. The next day, while I prepared dinner in the kitchen, I deliberately mentioned that I needed to find my old recipe box, which might be in the basement. I sighed loudly. But those stairs are so hard on my knees these days. As I had hoped, Tom's helpful nature and curiosity combined. I could look for it, Grandma, he offered. Oh, would you, dear? That would be so helpful. The basement door is right past the laundry room, but be careful on those stairs. I watched as Tom led Sophie on their basement adventure, feeling a twinge of guilt for using them this way. But I needed to know what was down there, and my children had left me no choice. Less than 10 minutes later, I heard pounding footsteps on the stairs. Tom burst into the kitchen, his face ashen, pulling Sophie by the hand. His eyes were wide with fear I had never seen in him before. Grandma, we're leaving. Now, he shouted, already heading for the front door, Sophie stumbling behind him in confusion. Tom, wait! What happened? What did you see? I moved to block their path, heart hammering in my chest. I need to call Mom, he insisted, trying to reach around me for the phone. We can't stay here. Please, Tom, tell me what scared you. I knelt down to his level despite the protest in my joints. This is my house. I need to know. Tom glanced nervously toward the basement door, then back at me. There's weird stuff down there, Grandma, behind a fake wall. Uncle Brian told us never to tell you about it. Sophie nodded vigorously. Big machines making noise, and pictures of Grandpa with scary-looking people. A fake wall? I repeated, my suspicions confirmed. Tom nodded. Part of the wall moves. There's a hidden room behind it, with computers and big metal boxes with lights, and it's hot in there and loud. I took a deep breath, trying to process what they were telling me. How did you find this hidden room? I was looking for your recipe box, Tom explained, and I accidentally leaned on this one section of wall and it just moved a little. So I pushed harder, and there was this whole other room behind it, with all this equipment running. And pictures, Sophie added. Lots of old pictures of Grandpa and people I don't know. They looked like bad guys from movies. I managed to calm the children enough to call Margaret, saying only that Tom wasn't feeling well and wanted to go home. I promised to explain everything later. After driving them back to their house and assuring a concerned Margaret that it was probably just a stomachache from too much ice cream, I returned home with newfound determination. This ends tonight, I thought as I parked in my driveway. No more secrets in my house. I was surprised to find Brian's car already there when I returned. He stood in the living room, his face a mask of controlled panic. Where are the kids? He demanded before I could speak. Tom texted me something about the basement. I took them home, I said calmly, setting down my purse. And now you're going to tell me exactly what's going on in my basement, Brian. No more lies. Mom, please, you don't understand. He began, running a hand through his hair, so like his father's. This is complicated. Then uncomplicate it, I said, my voice harder than he'd ever heard it. What are you hiding down there? What was your father hiding? Brian's shoulders slumped. Dad got into trouble a long time ago. Bad investments, then bad loans to cover them. He owed money to dangerous people. Frank told me that much, I said. What I want to know is what's down there now. A cryptocurrency mining operation, Brian admitted after a long pause. The same thing Dad set up to pay off his debts, just updated with newer technology. When he died, one of his old associates contacted me, said Dad still owed them. I knew it wasn't true that they were just trying to extort money, but they threatened to expose everything Dad had done. It would have ruined his reputation, your memories of him. So you started it up again using my electricity in my house without my knowledge. Each word was measured, controlled, though inside, I felt like screaming. How could you, Brian? I was protecting you, he insisted. If you knew, you'd be complicit. This way, if anything ever happened, you could honestly say you knew nothing about it. Like I honestly knew nothing about what your father was doing for all those years. The bitterness in my voice surprised even me. Brian flinched. Dad wanted to protect you too. He loved you so much, Mom. Everything he did was to keep you and us safe, to give us the life he thought we deserved. By breaking the law, by lying to me every day, that's not protection, Brian. That's betrayal. He reached for me, but I stepped back. Don't. Just don't. I'm going down there right now and seeing exactly what you and your father have been hiding from me all these years. Mom, please, not tonight. Let me explain everything properly first. No more delays. No more excuses. This is my house, and I'm going to see every inch of it tonight. I moved toward the basement door, surprised when Brian didn't physically try to stop me. Instead, he followed silently as I descended the stairs, flipping on lights as I went. The basement looked as it always had, cluttered with boxes and old furniture. But now, with new eyes, I examined the north wall carefully. A section of it appeared different, the paint slightly newer, the baseboard not quite matching. Show me how to open it, I demanded. Brian sighed in defeat, pressing against a specific spot on the wall. With a soft click, a section swung inward, revealing a space about 12 by 15 feet that had been hidden from me for decades. The room hummed with the sound of multiple machines' fans whirring to cool the equipment that filled metal shelving units along the walls. Computer screens displayed scrolling numbers and graphs. The heat was intense, explaining the elevated electricity bills. But it was the bulletin board on the far wall that drew my attention. Photographs, some yellowed with age, showed William with men I didn't recognize. In one, he stood smiling next to a man whose face I had seen recently on the news, arrested for fraud and money laundering. In another, he sat at a table covered with cash, looking younger than I remembered him ever being. Beneath the photos were documents, some in William's handwriting, detailing transactions and code names. A ledger showed payments in and out, spanning decades. This room told the story of a husband I had never truly known. Your father, I said, my voice barely audible above the humming machines. He was laundering money, wasn't he? Brian nodded slowly. It started small, just helping some guys he met move money around. Then it grew. By the time he wanted out, he was in too deep. They had leverage over him. And now they have leverage over you. I concluded, the pieces falling into place. I thought I could handle it, Brian said, his voice cracking. Pay them off one last time, then dismantle everything. I never meant for it to go on this long. I touched one of the photographs, tracing William's familiar smile with a finger that trembled. All those years, our entire marriage, he was living a double life. He did it for us, Mom. For you. Don't you dare, I said, turning to face my son with fury I rarely showed. Don't you dare use me as justification for this. Your father made his choices. You made yours. Neither of you respected me enough to give me mine. We stood in silence, mother and son, surrounded by the evidence of decades of deception. The foundation of my life, the memories I cherished, all called into question by this hidden room beneath my feet. I felt as though I was underwater, sounds, muffled movements slow as I tried to process the magnitude of what I had discovered. The basement room revealed a side of William I had never known a man capable of elaborate deception. And my children continuing that deception, keeping me in ignorance for my own good. "Does Margaret know?" I asked Brian, still standing in that humming room of secrets. He nodded reluctantly. "She found out after Dad died. I needed help with the legal aspects, setting up accounts that wouldn't be traced back to you." Margaret appeared at the basement door then, as if summoned by her name. She must have come straight from dropping the children at her ex-husband's house, still wearing her business clothes from her cut-short conference. "Tom called me," she said, taking in the scene with resigned eyes. "Said you knew everything. I came as fast as I could." "Not everything," I said. "Not yet, but I'm starting to understand just how thoroughly I've been deceived by the people who claim to love me most." Margaret winced at that. "Mom, we do love you. That's why we kept this from you. Dad started this whole mess before Brian and I were even born. He got in over his head, made deals with dangerous people. By the time we were old enough to understand, he had created this whole system." "The money laundering operation," I said flatly. "It wasn't just that," Brian interjected. "Dad also helped move physical goods, things that couldn't go through normal channels. The basement was a waypoint." I remembered the mud on the floor, the unknown footprints. "So strangers have been coming into my home using my basement for illegal activities, and neither of you thought I deserved to know." "We were trying to end it," Margaret said, her professional composure cracking. "Brian has been paying off the last of the obligations Dad left behind. We thought once it was done, we could close this chapter for good. You would never have to know." "And the equipment," I gestured to the humming machines. "Cryptocurrency mining," Brian explained again. "It generates digital money, untraceable, perfect for the kind of transactions we need to make. Dad set up the original system 20 years ago, though it was much more primitive then. I've been updating it, making it more efficient." I sank onto an old storage trunk, suddenly exhausted. "My whole life has been a lie," I whispered. "Every memory, every moment with William, all tainted by this." "That's not true," Margaret insisted, kneeling beside me despite her expensive suit. "Dad loved you completely. His greatest fear was that you would discover this side of him and stop loving him. He protected us from the consequences of his bad decisions. Yes, he lied about this, but everything else, his love for you, for us, that was real." I wanted to believe her, but the evidence of decades of deception surrounded me. The hidden room, the secret life, the continuing conspiracy between my children, all painted a picture of a family built on falsehoods. "I need both of you to leave," I said finally. "I need time to think." "Mom, you can't stay here alone," Brian protested. "It's not safe. These people, Dad's old associates, they've been watching the house." "This is my home," I said firmly. "I've lived here for 40 years, and I'll be damned if I'll be driven out of it by ghosts and criminals. Go home, both of you. We'll talk tomorrow." Reluctantly, they left Margaret, promising to call in the morning, Brian casting worried glances back at the basement door. I locked up behind them, then returned to the secret room, determined to understand exactly what had been happening under my roof. I spent hours going through the documents on the bulletin board, learning the extent of William's involvement in a money laundering operation that spanned decades. He had started small, helping move cash for some friends from the bank, then gradually became more deeply entangled. The hidden room had served as both an operations center and occasionally as storage for cash or other items in transit. The photographs showed William with various associates over the years, some faces appearing repeatedly. One man in particular caught my attention, appearing in photos spanning 20 years. Heavy-set with cold eyes and an expensive suit, he seemed to be the authority figure in the group. As if my thoughts had conjured him, a knock came at my back door around midnight. Through the security peephole, I saw him, older than in the photos, but unmistakable. The man from the pictures standing on my back step, as if he belonged there. Against my better judgment, I opened the door, a crack chain still engaged. "Who are you?" I demanded. "Mrs. Wilson. Finally we meet." His smile didn't reach his eyes. "I'm an old business associate of Williams. May I come in? We have matters to discuss." "It's midnight," I said. "Whatever business you had with my husband died with him." "I'm afraid not. Your son has been managing Williams' obligations, but recent developments have accelerated our timetable. I need to collect certain items from your basement. Items that belong to me." Fear prickled along my spine, but I refused to show it. "There's nothing down there that belongs to you. My son has already removed all the equipment." It was a bluff, but the man's narrowed eyes told me I'd struck a nerve. "Your son has been skimming, taking advantage of our arrangement. That makes our agreement void." "I don't know anything about any agreement," I said, my hand inching toward the panic button on the security system Margaret had installed. "But I do know you're trespassing. Leave now or I'm calling the police." "You don't want to do that, Mrs. Wilson. There are 40 years of evidence in that basement that would put your precious children in prison. Do you want that?" Before I could respond, another car pulled into my driveway, headlights illuminating the man's startled face. Brian jumped out, rushing toward us. "Get away from my mother," he shouted. "You have no business here, Dvorak." Dvorak, so that was his name. He turned to Brian with a sneer. "Your mother and I were just getting acquainted. She doesn't seem to know much about your father's business. Or yours." Brian pushed past him, joining me at the door. "Mom, go inside. Call the police." "Police won't help you, boy," Dvorak said. "Not with what I know. Your father may have been content to be my errand boy for decades, but I expected more ambition from you. Instead, you've been stealing from me, using the operation for your own gain." "That's not true," Brian insisted. "I've been trying to close things down, pay off Dad's debts. You're the one who keeps moving the goalposts." Their argument escalated, spilling into my kitchen as I backed away, phone in hand. When Dvorak grabbed Brian's shirt, shoving him against the wall, I acted on instinct, swinging the heavy cast-iron skillet from the stove rack. It connected with Dvorak's shoulder, causing him to release Brian with a howl of pain. "Get out of my house!" I commanded, skillet still raised. "Now!" Dvorak rubbed his shoulder, his expression darkening. "This isn't over. Your husband owed me. Your son owes me. One way or another, I'll collect." Blue lights flashed outside a patrol car, responding to the silent alarm I had triggered with the panic button. Dvorak saw them too, his face contorting with rage. "You'll regret this." He spat, then slipped out the back door before the police could reach it. When the officers arrived, I had a split-second decision to make. Tell them everything, exposing my family's illegal activities, or continue the deception that had ruled my life for decades. Looking at Brian's terrified face, I chose a third option. "That man was threatening us," I told the officers. "He claimed to know my late husband, but he was trying to extort money from us, saying my husband owed him. He's been harassing my family for months." It wasn't the whole truth, but it wasn't a complete lie either. The officers took our statements, promising to patrol the area more frequently and advising us to file for a restraining order in the morning. After they left, Brian collapsed into a kitchen chair. "I never meant for any of this to touch you, Mom. I swear." "It's too late for that," I said, sitting across from him. "It's time for the whole truth, Brian. Everything. And then we're going to fix this once and for all." Over the next few days, I took control of the situation that had been controlling me for decades without my knowledge. First, I demanded complete transparency from both my children. No more protecting me from the truth. I told them firmly as we sat around my kitchen table. I want to know everything, every detail, every risk we're facing. Only then can we find a way out of this mess. Margaret and Brian exchanged nervous glances before beginning a full confession of what they knew about their father's activities and their own involvement since his death. William had indeed started small, helping move money for people he met through the bank. But as time went on, he became more deeply entangled, unable to extricate himself as the operation grew, and the people involved became more dangerous. The hidden room in our basement had served multiple purposes over the years: a secure location for counting and packaging cash, temporary storage for items being moved, and in recent years, a cryptocurrency mining operation that generated untraceable digital funds. William had built it himself with Frank's help during that week he took off work so many years ago. When Dad died, Brian explained, Dvorak approached me at the funeral, said Dad still owed him protection money for keeping quiet about the operation all these years. Threatened to go to the police with evidence that would destroy Dad's reputation and possibly implicate you if I didn't continue running things. So, instead of going to the police yourselves, you decided to continue your father's illegal activities. I couldn't keep the disappointment from my voice. We thought we could handle it, Margaret said, her usual confidence absent. Pay him off one final time, then shut everything down cleanly. But every time we got close, Dvorak would raise the amount or add new conditions. And in the meantime, you kept me completely in the dark, let strangers into my home when I wasn't here, and lied to my face every time I asked questions. The hurt was still raw, a wound that would take time to heal. We were wrong, Brian admitted, unable to meet my eyes. We thought we were protecting you, but we were really just protecting ourselves from having to face the truth about Dad. And maybe from having to face your disappointment in all of us. I took a deep breath, trying to separate my personal pain from the practical problem at hand. What we need now is a plan. This man, Dvorak, isn't going to simply disappear because we want him to. And I refuse to live in fear in my own home. The next day, I visited Frank again, this time with direct questions that demanded honest answers. Tell me everything you know about Dvorak and his operation, I said, sitting across from him in his small living room. No more half-truths or vague warnings. My family is in danger, and I need to understand exactly what we're dealing with. Frank looked older than his 70 years as he spoke. Edward Dvorak started as a loan shark in the 80s, built up a network of money laundering operations, using people like William, banking professionals with clean records and good reputations. William got pulled in after some bad investments left him desperate. By the time he wanted out, Dvorak had enough evidence to destroy him. And William never thought to go to the police-turned-state's evidence. Frank shook his head. Dvorak had connections in the department back then, and William was terrified of what would happen to you and the kids if he came clean. Better to keep paying and protect his family, he thought. What about now? Does Dvorak still have these police connections? Not like before, Frank said thoughtfully. The old guard has mostly retired, and Dvorak isn't the power he once was. Heard he's lost territory to younger operations. He's desperate to hold on to what he has. This information gave me an idea, a way to finally free my family from Dvorak's grip. But I would need evidence proof of what had been happening in my basement all these years. Over the next week, I gathered everything I could find. William's old journals, the photographs from the bulletin board, the ledgers showing transactions. With Brian's reluctant help, I documented the current operation, taking photos and videos of the equipment and explaining its purpose. Then I contacted a friend from my days at the library, now retired from her second career as a paralegal. She recommended a lawyer specializing in criminal defense, one with a reputation for integrity and discretion. I made an appointment, bringing my carefully organized evidence with me. The lawyer, Ms. Patel, listened without judgment as I laid out the entire story from William's initial involvement to the current threats from Dvorak. What you're describing is a decades-long criminal enterprise, she said when I finished. One that your husband participated in and that your son has continued. The statute of limitations has expired on some of the older activities, but the current operation is very much prosecutable. I understand that, I said, and I'm prepared to face those consequences. But I want to be the one to bring this to the authorities on my terms, with protection in place for my family. That's possible, Ms. Patel said, examining the evidence I had brought. Especially if you're willing to help build a case against this man Dvorak. He sounds like a bigger fish than your family members. I am, I said firmly. I want him out of our lives permanently. With Ms. Patel's guidance, I approached the FBI rather than local police, providing them with all the evidence I had gathered. I told them about the threats from Dvorak, his appearance at my home, and the years of illegal activity conducted in my basement. I made no excuses for William or my children, but I did make it clear that I was cooperating fully in hopes of leniency for Brian. The FBI agents were particularly interested in Dvorak, who they confirmed was on their radar for multiple operations across several states. They set up surveillance on my house, waiting for his next attempt to contact us or access the basement. They didn't have to wait long. 3 days later, Dvorak returned, this time with 2 associates. Using the key he somehow still possessed, they entered through the back door while I was supposedly at my book club. Instead, I was sitting in an FBI surveillance van parked down the street, watching their entry on camera. The agents moved in quickly, catching Dvorak and his men in the hidden room where they were attempting to remove some of the cryptocurrency mining equipment. The evidence was irrefutable, and with my testimony and documentation, the case against him was strong. Brian was arrested too, but as agreed, his cooperation and my extensive assistance to the investigation led to reduced charges. He would serve some time, but not the years he might have faced without our proactive approach. In the aftermath, as reporters dug into the story and neighbors whispered behind their hands, I held my head high. I had not created this situation, but I had finally ended it, bringing the decades of deception into the light. The hardest part was explaining to Tom and Sophie why their uncle had been arrested. Margaret and I sat them down together, giving them a simplified version of events that emphasized the importance of honesty and the courage it takes to admit mistakes. Sometimes grown-ups make bad choices, I told them, holding their hands in mine. But it's never too late to make things right. That's what your uncle is doing now, and what I've tried to do too. Tom, serious beyond his years, nodded. Is that why you're selling the house, Grandma, because of the bad things that happened there? Partly, I admitted, but also because it's time for me to start fresh. Sometimes a place holds too many memories, both good and bad. It's time for a new chapter. A year has passed since the day my grandchildren fled my basement in terror. A year of profound change and healing. I did sell the house, unable to continue living with the ghosts of deception that haunted every room. The proceeds went largely to legal fees and restitution, but I saved enough for a small, sunlit apartment near Margaret's home. Brian served 8 months in a minimum security facility, a reduced sentence thanks to his cooperation and my advocacy. He's out now, living in another state, working a legitimate job in IT and attending weekly therapy sessions. Our relationship is fragile, but healing built now on painful honesty rather than comfortable lies. Margaret has softened somewhat, her corporate armor showing more cracks as she allows herself to process the truth about her father and her own role in continuing the deception. She brings Tom and Sophie to visit me several times a week, and our relationships have deepened now that there are no secrets between us. My own healing journey has been complicated. At first, I was consumed with anger and betrayal. How could William have lied to me for our entire marriage? How could my children have continued that deception? the foundation of my life. The memories I cherished, all called into question by what had happened beneath our feet. I joined a support group for families of white-collar criminals, finding unexpected comfort in sharing my story with others who understood the unique pain of loving someone while condemning their actions. Slowly, I began to separate William, the man, from William, the criminal, acknowledging that both were real. Both were part of the man I had loved. Forgiveness didn't come easily. Some days, it still doesn't. But I've come to understand that William made his choices out of what he perceived as love and protection, however misguided. My children, following his example, did the same. The road to healing isn't forgiving the actions, but understanding the misguided love behind them. Jean. My former neighbor visits me occasionally in my new apartment. She admitted she had suspected something wasn't right at our house for years, but hadn't wanted to cause me pain by voicing her concerns. "Would you have believed me if I'd told you?" she asked one afternoon over tea. "Probably not," I admitted. I saw what I wanted to see for a very long time. I've written about my experience not for publication, but for my own healing. The process of putting the story on paper helped me make sense of those decades of unknowing of the man I thought I knew so well, who kept such enormous secrets from me. These writings have led me to volunteer with a local organization that helps families coping with the incarceration of a loved one. I've found purpose in sharing my hard-earned wisdom with others, just beginning the journey of reconciling love with disappointment, trust with betrayal. Tom visits me most often of all. The experience in the basement created a special bond between us, a shared moment of discovery that changed both our lives. He asks thoughtful questions about his grandfather, trying to understand the complexity of a man who could be both loving and deceptive. "Do you think Grandpa was a bad person?" he asked me recently as we worked on a puzzle together. "No," I said after careful consideration. "I think he was a good person who made bad choices then couldn't find his way back. The tragedy is that he never trusted me enough to help him find that way." "I'm glad you found out the truth," Tom said, fitting a piece into place with satisfaction. "Even though it hurt." "So am I," I replied, and meant it. Truth, even painful truth, is always better than comforting lies. It's the only solid ground we can build on. That's the lesson I carry forward from this chapter of my life. The basement of my old house is just a memory, now the secrets it held brought into the light. I've learned that real safety doesn't come from protection through deception, but through honest reckoning with reality, however difficult that might be. The truth is, we never fully know the people we love, not every thought, not every secret. But we can choose to build relationships based on honesty, to create families where secrets don't fester in hidden rooms of our hearts. That's my commitment now to myself and to the people I love. If you've ever discovered a painful truth about someone you thought you knew completely, share your experience in the comments below. How did you handle it? Did it change your relationship forever? Or were you able to rebuild on a foundation of honesty? Remember to like and subscribe if this story resonated with you. And thank you for allowing me to share this painful but ultimately healing chapter of my life with you all. Remember, it's never too late to seek the truth and begin again.